This is the future.
Hello, I'm Edwin Rydberg, and you're listening to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie science fiction creators about their work, the world, and anything else in between. Today, I'm here with Kerry Boytzun. Kerry was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And feeling like a transplanted alien, Kerry pursued a career in IT while never taking his eyes off world events and human behavior. Unsatisfied with official explanations of Earth's shadowy past and present, his book Descendants of Atlantis is an imaginative dive down the rabbit hole. Kerry currently resides on Earth's surface at Lexington, Kentucky, with his wife, 2 dogs, and a cat. Hi, Kerry. Thanks for joining me today from across the pond.
Thank you, Edwin.
Your bio says you grew up in Edmonton. Is that right?
That's right. Edmonton, Alberta. Hey, like, how's it going, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Never did sound like that, but I have friends who did.
Yeah, well, I'm from rural Canada, so a lot of people where I'm from speak like that. It says to the dismay of everyone else. What did you mean by that in your bio?
Well, I poke a lot of fun at myself, self-deprecating humor. I have found throughout my life that people don't want the deep person, the person that asks. I don't know, can't tell you how many times I've been told, you ask a lot of questions. Not everything happens for a reason. It's above your pay grade. You don't need to know. Can't you be satisfied with just what everyone else does? No.
So that's the dismay part then. Everyone's doesn't like the questions.
Pretty much, yeah. Didn't win a popularity contest. Still
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it really depends on the circle of people you find yourself in. I checked out Edmonton actually, and strangely enough, where I am right now in North Yorkshire is almost the same latitude as Edmonton, but we get a lot less severe weather here, I think. It was pretty cold up there, I imagine.
It was the mosquitoes that chased me out of the place, though. Growing up there, of course, the weather now has become modified. Let's just call it that way. And so it didn't used to be the way it was. The way it was 40 below Fahrenheit or Celsius, however you want to call it. And it would be freezing in the winter. And Edmonton was, there was a lot of advancements there that I didn't see when I moved here to Kentucky. It was kind of surprised in a way. A lot of rational things that went on with just the naming of, like, streets were numbered, avenues were numbered, so anybody could tell anywhere where you were as far as coordinates go. But the mosquitoes were horrific. I mean, it's just not a few, but hordes of them. And anyone that lives there, they go, yeah, we know. My dad used to just laugh that they would spray it for the mosquitoes and they would just pretty much feed them. So yeah, I left. I moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, and that was great for a while.
So when were you in Vancouver then?
I was in Vancouver from 91 to 94. In Vancouver, I got trained in neurolinguistic programming, which is, if you think of Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins, that's it. And when I got trained big time. Marilyn Atkinson of the NLP Institute of Western Canada, or Canada, whatever we called it back then. And it was really hardcore for me. I was in there 6 weeks straight of massive training and ended up specializing in, for myself, and using it forward on how neurolinguistic programming is, how it's a model on how the mind is programmed. The mind, neuro, is programmed by language and symbols, but primarily language. The only types of people that are interested in NLP are, and I don't mean this facetiously, schemers, people who want to profit, people who want to control others, and the odd token few who want to have better relationships. And there is a minute few who want to understand themselves. It's like beliefs. Beliefs are math, like mathematical equations, like Boolean logic. If this happens, it means that. If that happens, it means this. And you would think that everybody that has a mind would be interested in having the manual, but they're not. They're just not. And so one of the reasons for writing my novel was an attempt at getting people interested in psychology, which branches into philosophy, and not the official psychologies that are taught out there, which are really, they're not like NLP.
So the neurolinguistic programming, is that then that is basically behavioral psychology? Is that a branch of it, or is it related at all?
I don't like to use labels because people may misunderstand. Essentially, it's like wagging the dog. It's multifaceted. You have touch and senses and a lot of different things that you can do, just manipulating the body to change behavior. My preference is the language because it's what we use the most. And especially as of the last 10 years, everybody has gotten very, what they call digital, into words. So you have the visual senses, you have the auditory senses, you have the kinesthetic senses, that word, touch, that sort of thing. And then you have digital, which is words. And most people don't realize it, but they're living in words. Even Eric Fromm, Fromm, he wrote several books about this. Say for one was The Art of Loving, and love has become love as a word has become a preference. If you think about it, I love this, that, right? But this is really valuable if you start applying it in your life. If you can't put it into a wheelbarrow, then it's not something you have, it's something you do. An elephant, for example. An elephant can fit in a very large wheelbarrow. Love can't be put in a wheelbarrow. Thus, it's not something you have, it's something you do. And if love is just thinking about someone, and if they make you happy and you really appreciate when they pay attention to you and they buy you toys and gifts and things like that, and you're just thrilled, to me, that's not love, that's enthrallment. And the reason most relationships fail or get old, as they say, is because the enthrallment wears off. Just like when you buy a new car, a new dress, a new suit, whatever it is, the enthrallment, the enamoration with it, it goes. And so what's left? What's left is the other person. And if you don't know how your mind works, then you're going to be in reaction mode all the time.
Yeah, that does seem to be where much of the population is right now.
Right. It's a deep subject.
Yeah. Well, I brought it up also. Well, I was interested in the behavioral psychology side of that because I've been reading a book called State of Fear about basically a large part of the book discusses the behavioral psychology in the British government, basically the departments they've used to manipulate the narrative surrounding the current pandemic.
Bingo. Words, symbols, repetitions. Oh yeah. If you don't know how your mind works, then you will be a puppet for someone else. You won't even know.
I guess the other field that's big with that is magicians as well. They're really good at that kind of thing. So is that the field you're still in then?
That's just been a personal forte, but no, I'm still in IT professionally, or computers, networks. I've been in that since 83, hence the gray hair.
So I was curious what started you down the path towards this book before we get into too much of the details of the book. I noticed you did reference the Matrix movie on your website. Was that sort of before, after, or is it just sort of a convenient signpost for people to recognize?
I don't recall exactly what I was referring to with the Matrix, but upon further study of the first Matrix movie, well, okay, so let's start with more or less. So why'd you go write this novel? So when I was in Vancouver, I had met some people because I think a lot. I got a big mouth, I make comments, and the short version is it took me on a path of researching so-called conspiracies. And to conspire is nothing more than to plan. You and I conspired to have this meeting, people conspire to have lunch. Conspiracies are going on all the time. So if the term conspiracy is really a evil conspiracy, well, then at that point we should learn how to discern evil. And so I've been, again, that's kind of my NLP brain going, that's just me going. And so I got into a lot of research, into a lot of rabbit holes. I've met various people. David Icke, met him in 1996 with my wife in Cancun. It's like meeting Fox Mulder, a colleague of mine, Michael Tessarian of michaeltessarian.com. He's one of the premier researchers of, well, let's just say history and present that you don't hear officially. And he aims at how the psychological underpinnings have created everything and all the groups and people and the symbolism that's in there. It's a pretty wild ride. And so a lot of people had, Michael included, had gone and written books on, so with David Icke, so a lot of people, they've written books on nonfiction books on what I wish people would be more interested in. And then I was thinking, well, maybe I'll write a fiction book, because the Da Vinci Code was successful in getting people wondering about Opus Dei, deeper aspects of Christianity, not in sense of the religion, but in sense of the institutions behind the religion. That's not the same thing, right? And so that's a fascinating journey right there. And so I was thinking, well, what could I go and write about? And I decided to go and write about the so-called underworld, these ancient groups which didn't die off. They're still around. And people would say, well, how do you know they're still around? And it says, well, they're always advertising, pretty much bragging about everything. You can see it in the symbols, and you have to learn to interpret the symbols. For example, if you go in the wrong or the right neighborhood, you will see gangland graffiti everywhere. They are not just painting symbols for fun. It's warnings. We're here. This is our territory. All ye who pass shall suffer the consequences, that sort of thing. That's the original intent with their tattoos. A lot of people are getting tats now just for, I don't know, reasons. And so that's the attempt with the novel. The attempt with the novel, besides having heroic characters, again, getting into psychology, the hero's journey, where life isn't about getting stuff. Life is about learning through the path of trying to attain something, to accomplish something, get to know something, to understand yourself and others. And I'm just not seeing that happening out there. And I wrote this, I designed it, took about 7 years to design it, because I had to go and teach myself how to write scenes, how to develop a novel. It was just, because I sucked. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did have a pretty good vernacular with dialogue and a crazy sense of humor. So that's what led me to write it.
I can appreciate the taking time to learn how to write. I went through a similar process myself when I started as well. So I have a little bit of a challenge on sort of how to approach your book from the point of view of this podcast, and which direction to go into first. What I wanted to kind of discuss was there's some questions you raised on your website then regarding the ideas that a person approaching your book would likely be considering. So, for example, why is language Orwellian? And it seems that regardless of what's said, the opposite happens. Things like that. If authority habitually lies, how can you trust historical stories? So, are these are the kind of questions, presumably, that did they start your journey, or did you sort of think more on them as you were along the journey with your book?
Oh, with the book, I had Michael had gratefully let me use a lot of his material as far as for research for the story world and trying to fit it in to provide the background of the organizations. And so what you just described there was me as an individual back in in my late 20s, trying to figure things out because things were not as they seemed. And so that just continued on. And at this point with the novel, I was just trying to lay out, you can't cram an encyclopedia into a novel. And so I thought, okay, the story world is going to be in the background of the story, which, as Larry Brooks, one of my mentors for StoryFix, he said a story is about something happening. And what he really means is that it's a journey. It's not a episodic what I did on vacation, but it's a journey it's like your wife shows up late, and she's covered in ash, her dress is torn, you're looking behind her, this is on the front street, and the car's smoking, stuff like that, and you're like, what happened? Right? You want to hear everything that's relevant. right? She goes, well, I got up, Edwin, when I got up this morning, and then I couldn't make up my mind if it was going to be Cheerios or cornflakes. So then I went and got the big, the bowls that I like, not the ceramic bowls that we bring out for the guests, but the plastic bowls. And I couldn't make up my mind if I was going to go with the almond milk or this. And they're like, can we get to the, I don't know, the torn dress and the smoking car that insurance may cover, that sort of thing, right? So it's got to be relevant. So the story's got to be a thread that's relevant. And how does one go? So I couldn't go and cram in, things that I'm trying to get people to expose. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go and tell a story, and happens to be based upon post-humanism or transhumanism, and also ties in artificial intelligence, which is ridiculous. And I work in IT. Let me tell you, from a professional 40-year-old or 40-year guy in the field, that there is no such thing as artificial intelligence as people think it is. Keyword is, this is getting Orwellian, artificial, fake, right? I got an artificial plant. Okay, is it going to grow? No. Artificial intelligence. This is the land of what you're seeing with artificial intelligence is the latest, all these apps that are going suggesting stuff to you. I mean, you go look at toasters, next thing you know, you're getting toasters on all your social media. That is not intelligent. If anything, that's annoying. And
that's true.
Right. And when using the NLP model, the NLP model does not account for the right brain, the intuition, the hunch, the intuitive aspect of us. I actually spent some time in Vancouver getting training from a lady, Deborah, who was very astute at channeling. People go, oh, scary, woo woo, and all that stuff. Yeah, but when you're a kid, that was called your imagination. You're talking to things, you're talking to yourself, you're talking to people, and you get a hunch. And all those, when you are writing and you got that muse going, you got a hunch. Where'd that come from? And things like that. That's the intuitive side. That's the side that, well, let's just say the underworld, want it crushed out of you. They just want you, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, right away, sir. Where do you want me to go and stick the screwdriver into the slot and turn it?
Creating the slave labor, the workforce.
Exactly. And so I might be running off the rails a little bit here as far as your question, but yeah, artificial intelligence, which is, so in other words, it's basically, it's exposed in the entire, throughout the entire novel to be the kludge that it is. It's just, it ain't gonna happen. You cannot have somebody who doesn't even want to know what the intuitive side is, a connection to the universe, to God, whatever it is that you want to call it. They're not interested in that. And these guys are making artificial intelligence. Yeah, I'll pass. Yeah, it'll probably fail anyways.
So do you think it's more of a term of once something becomes properly intelligent, it wouldn't inherently be artificial, or do you think that the entire concept of a machine intelligence is not realistic?
We have to look at what does intelligence mean. I can't put it in a wheelbarrow. So it's something that you do. It's an intelligent behavior. For chess, for example, a person can go and look at chess, and there's the checkerboard, and then there are the pieces, and these are how the pieces move. But do you understand the strategy? Can you go and learn strategies? Can you go and respond to your opponent's strategy? Now we're getting into intelligence. And that is something that, yeah, sure, they've got computers that play it, but they're all left-brained. Their artificial intelligence is only left-brained. I mean, these guys are manipulating weather. People go, no, they're not. Really? Okay, go prove me wrong. Go see Dane Wellington at geoengineering. And that's another thing. Schopenhauer, the philosopher, said that truth goes through three stages. First, it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, and then it's just, everybody knows that. And to this date, that's what people do. Okay, well, whatever happened to, I don't know, let's reach out to the expert, the person that's actually in the field. And so, no, that doesn't happen. And so if you got people like that designing intelligence, it's not intelligence, it's something else.
Yeah, we've kind of seen that whole truth pathway in the last couple of years, haven't we? Especially with the origin of the virus.
Yeah, the virus.
So I guess we're going to have to get into the details of your book now before we confuse the listeners too much anymore. But just before we do, I was curious, did you ever think to write this as a nonfiction book, or was it always the idea of to write a story set in this world, set in that background?
The nonfiction, for example, the past of Atlantis and how the descendants come here. Well, Michael's written that in several books and audios, and you're talking hours and hours of very fascinating stuff you can listen to, and it's so no, it wouldn't be reasonable. You'd have very thick volumes, and again, it already been done by people better at it than I. So I thought at this point, I'm just trying to get people interested. It's just, hey, Descendants of Atlantis.
So basically, you want to put a human, so to speak, image on the story, then, so to interest people rather than the dry nonfiction representation.
Trying to get more of the masses out there that aren't normally looking for. They don't, for example, the new normal that we've had in the last year and a half, where a sane person would go, well, it really 2019 and before that, there wasn't Armageddon in the streets. It wasn't the zombie apocalypse and all that other stuff. It's just, and I don't see that now, other than some changes in behaviors and required muzzles and things like that. So, those kind of people, they're already looking for various information, and maybe they decide to go look behind the curtain. Very, very few people do. They usually just look at mainstream or the popular bloggers, and then that's it. So I'm hoping that, people that read fiction, they're into imagination. Well, what if? Give them a good time and all that stuff, and maybe some of this stuff will sink in. And if not, nothing else in their personal life. It's like, are they looking at things objectively, rationally? One of the best books ever written was 1991, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. He's passed on now. You're not going to find that book in universities.
Yeah, that I guess that touches on one of your questions on your website as well, the education system, which teaches how to behave instead of how to create a better world. And I have a child moving through high school now. It seems fairly clear that the education system hasn't dramatically changed in the last 150 years. It essentially still wants to, at least the public system, wants to still churn out the cogs in the machine rather than people who can properly advance themselves, questioning and learning how the system properly works and thrive rather than just survive. So moving on to your book, then, it's called The Descendants of Atlantis, and that's the same as your website, descendantsofatlantis.com. So the backstory of this book, at least from the introduction in the book, starts about 30,000 years ago. I'm just wondering if you could sort of take us through that in let's say not a huge amount of time, but just to get some idea of what it is.
Okay, I'm looking at it in Scrivener. I don't know what you write in, but I love Scrivener, and so I use that.
I use Scrivener as well. Very good program.
Anybody curious about writing? So Scrivener's Microsoft. I know people use Microsoft Word. Well, it's essentially Microsoft Word on steroids, and you can keep track of all these different pieces. I can later on, if you want, we can even do a screenshot, and I can show you kind of like how I went and organized the novel. Anyhow, so there is the short version is there are researchers who have looked at mythology and archaeological, geological evidence as far as changes in the earth aligning with mythologies and discussions of things that had happened, everything from leftover radiation going back thousands of years. And everything seems to point to about 10,000 BC, about 12,000 years ago. And even the Ice Age is painted around there. So you got your official stories, which are, like, speaking of magicians, distracting you, hiding view from what went on, and people go, well, why? It's the same thing as a criminal cleaning the room, so that the fingerprints are gone, the evidence is gone, so you can't tell what happened, because we're led to believe that humans are just naturally greedy and fight amongst themselves and glorified sheep and well, they need a shepherd, and and that's not a knock on religion, but they just need to be someone to tell them what to do. And so there's discussion of, well, where did this all start from? And it seems that there was a visit, maybe multiple visits, but about 30,000 years ago, these clearly from the skies, the heavens of the stars, and the Nephilim, the Anunnaki visited. They started setting up this is in the Bible, which has recordings of older texts. And then they've got all the the non-written histories that are shared. And the short version is that they were on the run, they landed, they needed more people, so they started making more people, and they started making people in a lab because they were much taller and larger than the hominoids or whatever at the time, and so the births weren't working out. Basically the women were dying in childbirth, and they went to the lab, and they were making creatures in the lab. A lot of serious, stout religious people at this point will close the book and go, no, heathen. Just again, got to have an open mind. I mean, if you're willing to believe that 2,000 years ago, some guy was born from a woman who didn't have sex. I mean, to me, that opens the door on, well, what if aliens went and made some people in a lab? Actually makes more sense to me than a woman who didn't have sex. And you're going, well, a God did this. Well, okay, but what if it's metaphorical, right? What if this stuff is not literal but metaphorical? The virgin, in other words, virgin, not made through sex, made in a lab, right? Wouldn't that, in other words, there was no sex. Now we're into the virgin. Now the interest for myself was starting to come on. Yeah, what is that? That is because for me, a lot of how things were presented to me from day one as a kid, it just didn't add up. There's what I was told and how I saw people lived, and it's just no, not seeing it. It's not jiving. And then there's several versions of the understanding of what went on with the Nephilim. And but who had access to this stuff? A couple of guys in the Vatican archives, C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien. Now people are like, hey, wait a minute, I heard of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. I think I've heard of him too, but Tolkien for sure. Yeah, that's what they're writing about. They're writing about essentially the battles that were going on back in the pre-days of today's present-day man. Cro-Magnon man, to throw out a tidbit in there. The skull size is bigger than the current one. I mean, so bigger brain, right?
That's the elongated skull, right?
No. Just Cro-Magnon man. No, that Cro-Magnon man just looks like us, but had a bigger brain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just again, it's just not jiving. Yeah, the elongated skulls, things like that. Yeah, it's interesting, fascinating for sure. So there was a war essentially, and then it appears, from what I've read, that the so-called Ice Age was or Ice Ages was a glossing over of trying to hide out this actual war, which sunk continents, rose mountains. I mean, there's cause and effect. And then you had people scrambling to the, edges of wherever they could, get a foothold. And unfortunately, it's these descendants, actual, as I've described them or not, they're to this day, very determined in setting goals and making sure that they get what they want, which is, these are the guys who just kick over sandcastles, ultimately, at the end of the day. Someone else make a sandcastle, they kick it over. Why? Because they can't. And, people go, you can't look at these people rationally. They're psychos. They think, it's just the way it is. And so, yeah, this is a brief introduction, well, even the introduction, just to give the story world. And if people want to, they can start researching into it and go, and because the entire novel has Easter eggs all over the place, as far as for names of characters being names of actual people, things like that. There's groups that are mentioned in there, the Great Royal Wives Club, Dragon Courts, things like that. It's history for me in school was very boring. The alternate, looking at the under the hood of history, is very fascinating.
It's interesting you mentioned your own sort of background with religion when you were younger, because it sort of mirrors mine. So when I stopped going to church around 12 was precisely because I actually told my parents the exact same thing, I think, which was I don't believe in the divine story as it's told is not could not be something else like aliens. I was wondering, so in your book, and I think it's in the introduction, so it's not giving anything away, I believe. You have as the Nephilim, who then become the Atlanteans when they arrive on Earth, essentially. They create the Lemurians. Now, those two races are the ones that went to war. Is that correct?
That's what we've read, yeah.
And are they so you have, I think on your website you state or suggest that the Lemurians are still around. And I was wondering, what about the Atlanteans? Did they perish in the war? Are they still around as well?
To me, it's all about the descendants. They've all, I suspect, long ago that these races died out. And so what you're left over is the descendants. And for argument's sake, we're a descendant, humans, you and I. But we don't look at ourselves that way, right? We've been conditioned to, and we look at ourselves as humans. But imagine if there was groups of people for thousands of years, and then you learn of them because you're just a type A personality, or just, goal setting, steamroll, whatever it is you got to do to get rich and stuff. And then they start telling you, oh, we're descendants of these bloodlines, and da 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 da, going all back to the pharaohs, and going back to Akhenaten and this and that. And thus we are entitled to do whatever we want. And you sure see that out there in the behavior. Behavior, talk is cheap. Behavior tells you as close to the truth as you can see. People will avoid what the people avoid saying and doing speaks the loudest.
Yeah, that's certainly true. So going back to, well, you mentioned Akhenaten, if I'm pronouncing that right. And I was wondering then, so as a one of the leaders that arose and started trying to change some of that society, the Egyptian society, he was one of the unusual Egyptian leaders, at least it stands out in the records from what I understand. But when he died, there was an uprising, it appears, that basically tried to erase his memory from the history of Egypt almost. Is that a correct understanding? And then if so, are there have been uprises throughout history, or is it more or less a steady control?
Do you mean an authentic uprising?
Not necessarily. I mean, there looked to be an attempt to erase him from history. I don't know, like, the degree of, like, all the things he tried to change were almost set back to the original. Maybe that's not an uprising. Maybe that was someone else getting rid of him.
Akhenaten was actually working with the Hyksos, I think Parthians. These guys are Michael Tessarians. He and various other researchers are the experts with this. The short version is that Akhenaten came in and started wreaking havoc with Egypt, and the people he represented they got rid of pantheism, which is multiple gods, and went with the singular god, monotheism. And Sigmund Freud even wrote a book, of which his colleagues warned him, do not publish that book. It's called Moses and Monotheism, or you will be killed. He published it, he died. And it's about Moses and Akhenaten being the same character. And so, in other words, you got to go back to symbolism. These stories, Moses parting the water, things like that, it's all symbolic. You don't have these Moses, they'll represent a group. Mary Magdalene, they'll represent a group, not a person. This stuff isn't biographical. So yeah, they eventually threw him out of Egypt, and then they went back to the West, Land, for a lot of people, Ireland. One of Akhenaten's daughters, if I remember correctly, was named Meritaten, and Scotia. Anyways, Scotland is named after her. Scotiabank, named after her. You see these names, that's what I mean. They're all over the place. And I think she was buried in Ireland. or whatever. And so this whole, even got to the DNA of one of the pharaohs was Caucasian. It's just redheaded. It's a wild ride. Is what was really going on. And what's to me the question you got to ask yourself isn't so much why we haven't been told this. Is that why has someone gone to such great lengths to hide it? It's not like we forgot to tell you.
So then that kind of plays into the idea that we have as descendants. There's the two groups basically that are descendants of the originals. So humans then would appear to have been the dominant group populating the surface, and the second group living underground in caves, or obviously perhaps hidden on the surface as well. Are they a much smaller population? Why hide is the thing I'm wondering about. I mean, they're not hiding super well these days, perhaps. If
right. So are we speaking for the novel, or are we speaking in metaphorical terms for present day? What would you prefer? How would you prefer the answer?
Let's say the second one, the metaphorical present day.
Right. If nobody knows who robbed the bank, then they can't be caught for it. If you go and if you go through three people, right, you find yourself three different groups, and the last group is the one that robs the bank, but they were taking orders from the second group, and the second group is taking orders from the first group, and the first group is taking orders from the people who nobody ever knows about. Then you got it made, and that's the way these guys do it. Guys and gals, men and women. And you will see Hollywood will go and give you hints as far as to some of their rituals. Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut. Rumor has it that he exposed a little too much, and so he got whacked for that. Their population size is much, much smaller because you're on a need to know basis. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and go, Edwin, I got a secret. Don't tell no one, right? Really? If it's a friend of mine used to say, if it's a secret, don't tell me. He says, you're going to tell me, then I'm going to tell anyone I want because it's not a secret.
Yeah, that was one of the most fun things, seeing my daughter in primary school, because they would tell each other secrets, and we kept saying to them, well, why do you keep telling them a secret? Because they're going to tell everyone else.
Sure, exactly, right. And so that if you really don't want to be known, then you're not going to go on TV. Nobody's going to know who you are. Rothschilds, which used to be Bowers, they changed their name. And remember in hockey, Bauer Skates?
Right, yeah.
I don't know if that's the same Bauer family. I don't, but they make good skates. But you have like the Windsors, royal family. They're not the Windsors.
In what way do you mean?
They're not the Windsors. They moved from the German area, and their last name is different. Tessarian's got it all written up, and other people have as well. And these guys were ruthless. Why would you change your name? Because you don't want any of your deeds following you. If your last name was Eastwood, like Clint Eastwood, are you going to change your name? Likely not. Hey, you're Clint Eastwood's son. Well, he was actually in a good role the other movie. But a person has to think like these kinds of people, which is what I try to outlay in this novel. You can't look at it like you're you. And even, putting on my author's hat, my writing hat, one of the major problems out there or mistakes that a lot of authors make is they're writing as if they were doing something, whatever, like me, I'm an IT, stuff like that. I can't write about being an axe murderer unless I imagine I'm an axe murderer, and what that axe murderer would do. So when people go, there's no evil people out there that are that evil and crazy and sinister, dark, like Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, but you're thinking like you're thinking about, soccer games and barbecues, and maybe at most you're going to go and throw your coworker under the bus to your boss, right? I mean, that's the extent of it. If you could rob a bank and get away with it, I like to ask people that question. They just, really, how? I'm in.
Yeah, well, if you pay attention, for sure, there's a difference between the imagination of the average person, like you say, what they would envision, and what the the people in power what are actually doing. I mean, the more you look into it, the more you can't really avoid seeing it. And just also, like when you're talking about the royals living in England now, the more I've sort of learned of British and European history, the more you come to realize that it's a handful of families almost that have dominated the history of the entire continent, more or less, and it's amazing. So you also list on your website some themes, which I found quite interesting from the book. The question of, I suppose, almost self-identity in one case, and this applies, I think, more and more to us as we're moving forward potentially as well. But if you create a life form, who owns the rights to that life form? Is that life form independent? Do you respect it? At what stage does it gain respect, for example? And like what you were saying before, we don't even know what intelligence is yet properly. So what are your thoughts on that? How relevant is that? I mean, that's quite a relevant issue now.
If you're Dr. Frankenstein and you're making Frankie, let's just cut to the chase. What do you want Frankie to do? Is you want him to be able to walk around, go and kill people? Do you want Frankie to be able to drive your car around? Do you want Frankie to do your laundry? Things like that. Do you want Frankie to be able to entertain you? If entertaining you like with, I don't know, jokes and things like that, you're going to probably have to teach him to read and things like that. Something more practical, while you were saying that, I was thinking about parents. Anybody can make a kid, right? Having kids and mentoring them are not the same thing. Soccer games can mentor a kid if the kid has been coached by the parent to understand what happens in the game's context, with interacting with their own teammates, the other team players, what it means, things like that. Somebody goes, you're rotten, and punches you in the face as you go by with the soccer ball or something like that. It's like, you might feel at first, they didn't like me, I'm no good, I'm a loser, or whatever it is, or you're angry and you want to fight them or something. But ultimately, it's like, why does a person do that, right? You should get deeper than that. What can I learn? Should I be treating other people's like that? Should I just be sucker punching people with the fist? Or if I got a chance to screw them, if I'm selling them a car and don't forget to tell them that it was flooded or something like that. Where is my ethics, right? So yes, you made a baby, right? You are the so-called creator of that baby, as an agent of the gods, God, however it is you want to do it. But it's your responsibility to mentor the child. But how can parents mentor something when they haven't been mentored? And the only way to do that is to get into psychology, how the mind works, so that you got a chance. I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing people, I remember seeing in the 90s where they would get DVD players and they stick the kids in front of that and they're just watching, The Littlest Princess like 6-7 times. And I'm just thinking, you morons. It's just, you're not teaching them anything. Hollywood's teaching them. Look around, right? The world we're in is courtesy of that kind of indoctrination, for better or worse, and it's clearly worse.
Yeah, well, that's, now it's, of course, tablets and mobile phones and stuff instead of DVDs. And I see we've been quite lucky. I can stay home and look after our child and raise her. And that's given us a big advantage, I think, in that I am there to properly mentor her, as you're saying. And I think that that's a big issue right now that we haven't even started to address, is the two-parent working families don't have that time. So now, like you say, Hollywood raises their children, and we see the results of that, I think. So with regards to the creations, then, we seem to have almost made a decision legally anyway with, like, I'm thinking of GMO type products, and it'll be interesting and maybe frightening to see what kind of legal slippery slope that moves down as the creations get more complex. And then moving into, if we're able to create any kind of machine intelligence, and that was a discussion we already had a little bit, but I just have this nightmare. Like right now, the social environment is that everyone's hashing up the history, all the bad things that happen in history, and throwing those people and their descendants under the bus, basically. And I just have this vision of a machine uprising where some kind of machine intelligence looks back and sees at what we did to all the devices, the unintelligent devices we had, and starts uprising against us.
Right. Terminator,
Yeah,
that sort of
it's
thing.
like, now the oppressed are uprising. So you did mention there's a question here, have the Atlanteans damaged both species irreparably? So do you think that the situation we're in now in regards to the power structures is a result of the early tamperings, or did it come about more naturally just from the way the species are?
I'm with the tampering. There's the so-called junk DNA, which, mind you, of course, when you have science is, well, let's just call science an institution, and this institution has been, I won't say from day one, but very clearly in the last 40 years, been really manipulated by funding. You don't say what we want, you're out of here. And Michael Crichton's actually had quoted on that. Let's call it wiring. Remember when you're a kid, you go to school and you see and you run into these kids, and some kids are just, you can sense it. You can sense that these kids, there's more, they got some depth, they're intelligent. They can pick up on things. Then you got the ones that are just, they're just ham and eggs. Not talking about the quiet ones. You got the quiet ones that are there and they start watching everything. You just don't say anything. But you got ones that are just dumber than paint. And so in some ways, I think we are destroying that wiring through all of these injections, these things that aren't happening naturally. I'm going with the story that the Lemurians were just created, we'll just take some Nephilim DNA and some whatever hominoid DNA and da-da-da-da-da. And these guys were great until they decided to go and piss off the Atlanteans. But there's another version of the story with the Nephilim. And the other version of the story of the Nephilim is that evil people seduced and murdered the Nephilim and took over. And them ultimately were female. They're female because there wasn't any female Nephilim. If there was female Nephilim, then you go make Nephilim babies and, and then you're good. And then who knows, maybe we'd be Nephilim today, 15 feet tall or whatever it was that they were or something like that. But no, that didn't happen. And so they got seduced. It sounds like. And then the magic was stolen, the technology, and that was that. Either way, I see that, I'm pretty smart. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an idiot with a lot of the way I do things and stuff like that. But I could put things together. I have no boundaries. What I mean is, I have no limits with, you shouldn't think that that's possible because, that's just not what everybody thinks. I don't care. It's just, I'm going to go with whatever makes sense. And then, in the first Matrix movie, there's a scene. And in fact, I can send you this data if you want it. I actually did a write-up on it. But do you remember where Neo, he's like sleeping at the keyboard and then the screen is typing away and it's knock, knock, Neo, follow the white rabbit. The white rabbit, that's a symbolic for these ancient groups, by the way. And so he goes to the door, opens it up, he sees the characters behind there. And he's like, oh yeah, wait a minute, goes and closes the door. He goes to the bookshelf. He grabs a book called Simulation and Simulacra. I went and looked that up. That's an actual book. And what the author was writing about is how people are no longer seeing reality. They are seeing in their minds their interpretation of what is going on. Like right now, people might watch this video and they'll go and interpret, oh yeah, a couple of guys talking, got the big mouth guy in the red shirt, thinks he knows it all or whatever it is, or they're maybe got a different perspective. But the thing is that simulation simulacra was the perception clouded people from what was being open to what was really going on. And that's never been clearer than the last year and a half. And so he goes and he grabs the book. This is all symbolic too. So Neo is pulling a book. Like, so you got a character named Neo. Neo represents a group. A lot of people don't think this way, but trust me, he represents a group. He's pulling out a book. It's knowledge. The book is a physical book. He opens it up. It's hollowed out. Remember that? It's hollowed out inside his digital tapes. What they're saying is we're replacing written information with digital information. That's the symbolism there. He goes and he pulls out the tapes or whatever it is, sticks it back in the shelf, meaning we're done with that. That epoch is over. He goes over and opens the door, gives it to the guy, and he says, "You never saw me." What he means is for the group, you don't see us, you, the public, you don't see us. We're hidden, we're behind the scenes, Masonic, whatever it is you want to give them a name, but they're invisible. He just gave him information. The act of him giving information to the other guy, which represents the public, is just feeding him, spoon feeding him information through whatever, official history, official education, whatever it is, mass media, that's it. The guy goes and takes it, he goes something to the effect of, oh man, he says, "You're my own personal savior, my own personal Jesus Christ." Now, this will upset a lot of people, but essentially what they're saying here is this hidden group created the motif, the allegory of the Jesus Christ, the whole thing. And there's people who argue, "Oh no, he was real." It's just, oh yeah, did you know him? Right? You know him? Nobody knew him, right? So let's just roll with it, right? And so anyways, these guys spend a lot of money on this, and they give him that. And then he says, "Well, I'm late," or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a woman, she's got the white rabbit. She's representing an organization. She's the female Illuminati, if you will, Dragon Court. "Follow me, I'll take you down to the next thing." What's she doing? She's not taking me with the character. She's giving them the hidden group, the Masonic group, its marching orders. This is a hierarchy of groups. And so it's a fascinating scene. It was, I didn't realize it until I started, digging around about 6 months ago and looking at it again. It's like, holy crap, simulation, simmer clock. It's right in your face. It's right there. And that's what I mean. These guys are always talking about this stuff.
It is a movie that's incredibly dense with symbolism, isn't it?
The first one is, yeah.
Yeah, the first one, yeah.
Well, they ripped it off. A lot of people don't. They ripped it off. I know people who know people, and it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But yeah, they're the woman who wrote that, the Wachowski brothers, for example. They wrote and directed, and I thought they did a fabulous job of the first Matrix. They signed a non-disclosure agreement so that they could not discuss their own movie. That's like me signing a non-disclosure that I can't discuss my own novel. And this was the hit Matrix, right? Who wouldn't want to be talking about today? Hey, how'd you come up with that? Hey, that was awesome. Where'd that, this, that? No, they're not talking about it. Why? So they can't encrypt. Why? Well, pretty obvious. But who does that?
Yeah, very strange. Especially when you learn a bit more about the brothers themselves and what happened, how they transitioned afterwards.
I wonder if that wasn't a ritual. It's like, okay, you guys got to do this for us. Who knows?
I suspect we're going in a direction now that we could speak for another several hours on.
Oh, we could. I'd be happy to come back and yak, or if you ever want to talk personally, that's fine.
So before we move to the next segment of the podcast, then I have just sort of two questions I usually ask most of my guests. And that is, of the many issues facing humanity at the moment, which one would you be most inspired to base a story around? And maybe you've already based your story around that.
The irony is that, Edwin, is before I picked this novel or the right Descendants of Atlantis, I was actually writing about vaccine damage that was done. And this was 6 years ago. I was thinking of, it's a great movie. It's based on Aaron Brockovich, the movie. And that's one of the last movies that we actually see a heroic, strong woman. Not a woman with a big mouth that throws a fit, but an intelligent woman who, you go watch that movie. I recommend to anyone, go watch that movie and you'll see a woman that's intelligent. And women are not physically as strong as men, so they're not going to be beating them up with one punch and all that garbage, unless they're some kind of superhero. They're going to be using these, and they're going to be using their seductive powers. I don't mean being a slut, but they're just seductive powers to get what needs to be done. And so that along those lines, I was having a person and looking at started investigating vaccines, and I started looking at the vaccine insert of what's in, let's go look at the ingredients. Here's the ingredients, here's what's in there. But it's made in an egg. So if it's made in an egg, then you would have the DNA and the particular components, fragments of all of that yolk and the other stuff that's in there. Nah, that ain't in there. Really? Because of magic? Because you signed a non-disclosure agreement with the eggshell, right? In other words, right there, they're just lying. They're just lying as far as, the ingredients in this stuff. Because I was going to go write about that, but I'm just sticking with what I have. I got to write. I've started working on the second one, but I got to promote the first one because nobody's heard of it.
Is the second one related to the first one then?
Yeah, it's part 2. Yeah.
Okay. So the last question then I have is, again, of all the issues facing us, which one do you hope we get right moving forward?
I suppose I could only answer that by we have to look at in what way what part have we played in all this, and that's where it's kind of like when we go talk about the story cube there. It's have we been too compliant for our own good? Have we been going along for too long, just keeping quiet and expecting that people in powerful positions do the right thing? And if we don't wake up from that and realize how we have abdicated our own personal responsibility as parents, as humans, as living on this planet, there's no hope. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, that is one of my pet peeves is the requirement for people to take more personal responsibility, especially, as you say, if it should be pretty obvious now, but moving forward, it's going to become more and more obvious that that's crucial. And if we don't, then we're just basically going to be at the whim of a very small percentage of very powerful people.
Right.
Moving on to the second segment then of the interview, this I call Revenge of the Muse. So prior to this interview, I sent you 4 randomly rolled story cubes that represented the categories of hero, action setting, and science fiction element. And I asked you to prepare a short introduction to a story using those cubes as guides. And just for those following along at home who'd like to try their hand at this or to read the stories, they'll be on my website under the podcast section at alternatefutures.co.uk. And you said you'd like to read your story, and then we can discuss sort of the process you went through in analyzing the cubes.
So this is called The Invisible Guardian. Roger O'Reilly's motto was go along and you'll get along. Keep your head out of trouble. The tall nail gets hammered. At least that's what the Japanese told him. Today's problem is that 3 of his co-workers were dead. No cause of death. Died on the job with their boots on, face planted into the keyboard. Naturally, Roger was stuck with all their work. His superiors told him they were counting on him. Sure, counting on him to die. Good thing there was no one left to watch him drink. Screw the mask. What did he care? They all had their shots. But the Reaper took them anyways. In fact, Roger decided that he was going home and stumbled out of the office to the parking lot. Looking for his keys and his jacket, he crashed into a wall and fell back on the ground, holding his nose. What the hell? Roger's eyes watered as he looked up to see nothing. No wall. The cars were still 20 feet away. And he was sitting on the pavement next to the sidewalk. I am too drunk to be driving. Roger stood up only to bang his head into something that sounded like metal, knocking him down for the second time. What the hell is happening? Roger got on his knees and reached around with his hands like an invisible piñata was hiding. Standing a little bit higher, his hands hit something flat and smooth like the underside of a table, a massive table. The drunk monkeyed about, tracing hands all over a table joined to a wall that rose a few feet off the ground. Backing up, he came to the end of the table where it curled up briefly and became flat again, like a wing. Is this some kind of an airplane? Roger scratched his head. You're getting my bird all smudged up, the female said behind him. Roger spun around only to smack his head back into the wing, knocking himself down for the 3rd time. Groaning, he decided to stay down. He took in the blonde bombshell wrapped in denim, revealing a high dedication to gym workouts or martial arts. Where did you come from? She held onto the wing as she leaned down, grabbing his ankle and sliding him toward her like he was an empty box. I'm not from around here. The better question is, why should I let you live? She squeezed his ankle like a vice. Screaming, Roger sobbed, stop, you'll break my foot. She hissed, if I'm going to kill you, why would I care about your body parts? And this is your foot. She clasped his foot and squeezed, grinning as he screamed. I don't know why you should let me live. What did I ever do to you? Earthling, it's more like what you avoided doing. So tell me, are you a man or a rat? She dropped his foot, crossing her arms under her chest, which became a significant distraction. Roger fixated on her bosom until she kicked his foot. Ow! Not only are you a stupid rat, you can't think on your feet. No, technically I'm not on my feet. The visitor narrowed her eyes. And a smartass. How is it that nobody's killed you yet? Roger let his head fall back against the parking lot. He must be dreaming. Well, why did it have to be so painful? I always do the right thing when I'm told to do. That's why I'm still alive, Miss What's-Your-Face. In a blur, the blonde had him on his toes, face to face, nearly choking him one-handed as she stood. Snarling, she says, you humans are all alike. Stupid and narcissistic while believing you're at the top of the food chain. Have you looked around lately? Roger squirmed and gasped, can't breathe. And that's my problem because, I'm sorry, I don't know anything. First thing we agreed on. And why is that? She lessened her grip as he muffed, breathing again. I don't know. She shook her head and pulled out a card, sticking it in his pocket. That's the Three of Swords. It's upside down, like your world. Means it's reversed. Roger thought his next response might be his last. Thank you. She tossed him on the ground. He bounced his head against the wing on the way down. Reversed means that you're in denial, not facing the dark side, a coward. You have a lack, clearly intentional, of psychological insight, no fortitude. I'm not in denial of anything. I'm a nobody, just an ant. I stay out of trouble. She smacked him a good one. You call your life without trouble? You're the last in your department to be alive. Is that not enough trouble for you to get off your ass? Roger was confused. Some blonde from the sky was beating on him, like pulling the wings off a fly, and yet he hadn't killed him. Yet, punishing him with questions he couldn't answer. I don't follow you. Her eyes glowed blue and pain radiated into his skull like a Home Depot demonstration of new drill bits. Roger bounced around in the fetal position, screaming like a banshee. The pain stopped. Wait here, moron. She pushed something past the invisible wing and climbed into midair and vanished. Roger gave serious thought to running for his life, but gave up. She'd find him and would really be pissed. He didn't want to see how that turned out. She really appeared, reached down and tore his shirt open, stabbing a dime-sized disc onto his chest. It spun and burrowed itself into his skin, its blood splattering everywhere. She sprayed the wound with something, the pain stopped. The wound healed. A vicious grin formed on her lips, and Roger wished he had run. Okay, Mr. Nobody, I want you to seek out the cause of your coworker's death. Maybe you'll grow a pair, or not. I really don't care. What? You want me to find out how they died? They died of a heart attack or something. They're already turned to ash. She held up a remote and pushed a button. The dime in his chest came alive, firing pain into his body. Roger screamed as she turned it off. She threatened him with the remote as her eyes glowed blue. Listen to me, you spineless little rat. Instead of cheese, I decided to go with the stick. I will communicate with you and guide you along in your quest. Do not disappoint me or I will become upset. And you have not seen me upset. Understand? Roger truly hated his life. Finally, he meets a gorgeous girl, but she makes him her lab rat. He must be cursed. Zap! Rat boy, are you listening to me? Yes, ma'am, I'll do anything you say. No, moron, I want you to start thinking for yourself. I'm just the guide. Consider yourself in the hero's journey. Likely your first, maybe your last. Hero's journey? I'm no hero. Two things we agree on. I see no heroes in your land, only rats, sheep, and tyrants. You have 1 month to figure this out. After that, we're pulling the plug on your lot. Roger paused and then pondered on the plug. Can you repeat that? You heard me, Sherlock. That's the spirit. Start thinking and seeking. I don't know what to do, Roger whined, and he didn't want to complain, but he couldn't help it. Maybe death would be better. She kicked him in the ribs. Rat boy, you've never known what to do. Figure out something. Here's an idea. Go back in that office and locate your dead worker's home address and start there. Ask questions, follow the money, connect the dots. I'll be in touch. Roger held his ribs, afraid to make a peep. And grow a pair, will you? Okay, just stop hitting me. I'm motivating you. You lot have had it easy. Trophies for anything. Nobody knows how to defend themselves, let alone go on the offense. Offense? That's against the law. The law? Who do you think killed your friends? The Tooth Fairy? Roger thought she had a point. All he and his coworkers ever did was obey all the rules. Okay, I'll go in the office. How do I get a hold of you? It's on the card I gave you, numbnuts. She checked what looked to be some device on her sleeve. I'm late. I've got to go. And Roger, he stared at her. Don't let me down. She gave that evil grin and vanished into the invisible room or craft. He felt a hum on the ground and the air around him blew a brief gust and was silent. He put his hands where the wing was and is gone. Standing up, the craft was gone. He touched his chest and felt a dime. It was still there. In his mind, he heard, I'm watching you, rat boy. Get in that office before I test the range out of my new toy. Roger thought, bitch. I heard that. Fine, I'm going into the office. Damn slave driver alien, just take us over and put us out of our misery. That's the plan, Stan. There's just no escaping you, is there? Now you're catching on. Go to the office and discover something. Burn it down after you're done. Really? Kidding. I have to go. I'll be in touch, Roger the rat. Roger really hated his life now as he trudged into the office.
Well, that's great. Thanks. You really went beyond there with a 6-page document this time. I'm going to end up with a book eventually if authors keep going like this, which is not a bad idea.
Yeah, an anthology.
Yeah, exactly. So could you just walk us through your thought processes? Because you did have a little bit of trouble, and I'm not really surprised considering the cubes that I rolled for you and your interests. And so, yeah, I'm quite interested to hear what you did, how you did end up approaching it.
Okay. Well, and I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging or anything, but so I got tested a while back, and my left brain and right brain are pretty much equal. Most people are either one or the other. And but I've learned how to cultivate. Remember, I told you I took channeling courses back in 1992 or so, I think it was. Anyhow, so I learned how to get more in touch with my intuition and actually developed it from there. So when I'm writing, it's a combination of the two. So I looked at these 4 pictures, and I'm looking at what they represented to me symbolically, and I was waiting for intuitive feeling. To explain, sometimes you're just stuck or something like that, and you could be doing dishes or something, and then out of left field, and so if you learn to harness that, which is more or less have an intention to follow it back where those come from, you can open up dialogues with that sort of thing. And so I looked at the first one, and I thinking, well, okay, sports uniform, that sort of thing. 3 bars, there's the number 3. And then I was looking at, well, okay, let's see what the rest is. The one on the right, the action, fire, smoke, something triggering it. In fact, I even wrote that down. They got the action, match, lit, smoke. The journey has lit a fire under those who don't want to be discerned, and they're creating smoke to hide in. The setting or the journey, the telescope, discernment of what is tiny, far from being understood, yet hence the journey, right? The science fiction element, that to me, I just thought was a little odd, which ultimately, so I wrote down, because I wrote this stuff down before I actually wrote up the little bit. A man received bad news on a headset or is reporting something he doesn't like. It's like a talking head, announcer, sports commentator. These pictures are symbols. The man is communicating with ? I'll go with someone who's dead or in locked stasis. The hero intuits this being. That's what I wrote at the point. And then getting to the hero. So all of these ironically ended up forming the hero. And the hero, what kept coming into my mind was the tarot. And Tessarian is an expert with the tarot, and he's not like your fortune-telling tarot guy either. And so what came up for me was either the Three of Wands or Three of Swords. And I went to Three of Swords, it's reversed, which means the meaning is upside down. The term, in fact, that's where the term comes from, sort of saying, oh, things are upside down. That's actually going way, way, way back to the tarot, where things are reversed. And you're seeing that almost, that's so-called Orwellian. Everything like be safe, but it's reversed. The opposite of a be safe card is not safe, right? And so the hero, so the Three of Swords reversed, I wrote down in there, denial, not facing the dark side, a coward, lack of psychological insight, no fortitude. And that is 99% of people. And a lot of people, they'll take offense to it. I'm not I'm tough. Anybody tells me to my face. No, that's not what we're talking about. The courage to mentor your child, the courage to stand up to a ridiculous notion from your employer, which could, I'm not saying wear masks and get vaccines and all that stuff. I just even, you just know the idea is dumb. It's like, we tried that before, but you're just, I'll do it. Instead of coming up with something. I've had bosses tell me, they says, don't complain. If you don't like an idea, just come, give me a better one. He says, and so I've done that over the past. They're like, yeah, let's do that instead, right? And so, but it's like, you got to become heroic. You got to do that. You got to, you go to the gym, and if you ever start, I don't know if you ever went to the gym, but you just don't start off with the big weights and everything. You start small, gradually you start learning how to use the machines, the free weights and all that other stuff. It's the same thing with being heroic. You're developing your sense of will, your willpower, and you do that by little things. For example, you have a compulsion to eat chocolate chip cookies. So what do? You avoid the grocery store, but you need to go to the grocery store. So then you avoid the grocery store aisle that has the cookies, right? You don't go there. But after a while, you test yourself on purpose, right? I'm just going to go walk by the cookies. Eventually going to go and pick up the box of cookies, and you're not going to do it, right? You're building up that willpower. People might laugh that off. No, it's nothing to laugh off about. You can't fight the tyrant if you can't even deal with the cookie around you, right? All the obesity, right? It's just, they are not eating because they're hungry. Give it a term, whatever it is. It's just, if you can't deal with that, you're not going to be able to deal with the so-called world.
Yeah, it seems that's very relevant today. So that's really interesting. You took those in ways that I definitely would never have thought of, especially the three. That was quite interesting. Before we go, I just wanted to give you a chance to let people know what projects you're currently working on and where they can find you online.
Okay, Descendants of Atlantis.com is of course, where the novel is. There's a blog on there, which I haven't been doing because, I released this novel in February, March of 2020, and then, all that happened. And then I kind of got depressed and pissed off all at once. And so I hadn't been doing anything, but so I'm on Telegram. You can always people can reach out to me through the website and send me a message on there, and then I can give you a personal email. My personal email is kboytzun@gmail.com. I don't know how long I'm going to keep Gmail, I guess, until it becomes a problem. You never know anymore with the way things are. I'm on Facebook, currently in jail because I said something wrong, which actually was correct, but it was wrong as far as they were concerned. And then Gab, I'm on Parler. So yeah, the website, what projects am I working on? Besides working full-time in IT, which basically I'm paid to go and to be a Sherlock Holmes and figure out what you did that broke it. I have to, figure out on Amazon how to take out some ads so that my book gets seen, and maybe someone will take a chance on it, and then write the second book. And I'm getting so sore, like it's just sitting in front of monitors and stuff like that. I just can't do it like I used to. You used to be able to do it 7 days a week. I can't anymore. I'm getting too sore, and so it's cutting into things. So
yeah, I hear that. I'm on physio right now for my back because of sitting in the chairs too much.
one tip I can give you is that most people, they got their head forward. Their head forward is putting weight, and it's messing up the spine communicates all this nutrition and signals to things. And I got a chiropractor that's been working me and now my wife over. And I didn't realize it was this specific. It's like, I'm trying to be straight right now, but it's like, but then you start looking at the monitor and next thing you know, you're like this. And 2 hours later, you're like, oh, I should have done that.
Yeah, try to move around and stand a bit more. Make sure.
Oh yeah,
walks.
Yeah.
But
So,
Kerry Boytzun, is great to speak to you today. Thanks for talking to me.
yes, thank you very much.
And all the best on Descendants of Atlantis, and best of luck with your next book.
Thank you very much. All the same to you.
Thanks, and we'll hopefully talk to you again sometime soon.
Okay, Edwin, take care of yourself.
Thank you for listening. Transcripts of this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk, as are the StoryCube images and original story openings written by my guests. If you've enjoyed this, why not share it with friends and other sci-fi fans you know? If there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Finally, if you'd like to support this podcast financially, you can do so on Subscribestar. Just search for Alternate Futures. There you can find extra discussions and information that hasn't made it into the final edit. And thank you once again for listening. I hope you'll join us on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.